On today's show, free agency continues to draw near, and that means that it is time to discuss some more reports and some more rumors because we know this is the time of year where fans get the most excited. What is the latest on Khris Middleton, Brook Lopez, and even Jae Crowder? We haven't discussed Jae Crowder a lot. We're going to do that today. Jevon Carter, where does he lie in this difficult situation the Bucks find themselves in from a financial perspective? And are there any other names on the list they could pique the interest of Bucks fans? So plenty to discuss, and I've got lots of questions for you guys on today's show, so let's get into it.
You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Bucks. My name's Kane Pittman. You can see and hear me on this show Monday to Friday and also find my work over at ESPN. Riding solo today, there may or may not be a number of Locked On Bucks familiar faces traveling into town today, getting here for something that we're going to put together. So I'm riding solo, but that's fine because there is plenty of news to get through on today's show, and we're not going to waste too much time. But firstly, we do thank you all for making Locked On Bucks your first watch or first listen of every single day. Particularly during the offseason, and we're starting to lean into and start to get fired up a little bit about the free agency period. There's going to be news starting to trickle out, and we've certainly had some rumors over the last 24 hours since we did a show yesterday, 2 shows with Justin Garcia. So we appreciate the support. If you haven't yet, drop a like, drop a comment, and subscribe, follow, all those things. It helps us in a big, big way, and the show continues to grow. And it is free to do so. So we would absolutely appreciate that. So as I mentioned from the top, lots to get through in terms of some of the big names on this Milwaukee roster and what could potentially be happening over the next week or so. There is none bigger than Brook Lopez and Khris Middleton, and we've discussed both of these guys a lot over the last week for good reason. There seems to be continued optimism, and certainly everything you hear and read is suggesting that both of those guys are in a pretty good position to return to Milwaukee next year. As discussed on yesterday's show and previously, it makes the most sense for those guys to return to Milwaukee. And look, there's going to be some financial restrictions. Clearly, for a number of reasons that we can continue to get into, the lower the number for those two guys, the better you feel about the flexibility of what the Bucks front office can do with some of the names that we're going to continue to discuss on today's show. But Mark Stein, the latest, suggesting that the Bucks are in good position for Lopez and Khris Middleton to return. He also said that the Bucks are in a decent position for Jae Crowder to return. And I want to get into the Jae Crowder conversation right now because we haven't really gotten into it a lot. I think Jae Crowder is a difficult guy to get a read on based on what we saw last year because we just didn't see enough of it. It was too late in the season. We know his preparation leading up to that was far from ideal. So for Jae Crowder, I think the Bucks are in an interesting spot. So first, let me pull up the depth chart that we're looking at. And I was just, before I jumped on this podcast, reading through the Athletic story from Eric Name. And we're going to add a couple of names to this list. But this is basically, as of today, with the guys that are contracted on this Milwaukee Bucks roster, the projected depth chart, which looks a little bit thin. Let's just say that. So Jrue Holiday is obviously there. Jevon Carter, at the moment, we'll get into him a little bit later, but does he decline his player option? Certainly, it has been reported that that is going to be the case, but he's on this list. But let's remove him. So you got Jrue Holiday, Grayson Allen, Pat Connaughton, Beauchamp, Giannis, and Bobby Portis as your 6 guaranteed contracts or 5 guaranteed contracts. Jevon Carter will wait and see. So that's 5 guys that are guaranteed. You got the 2 rookies that you assume you're going to be able to lock up here on cheap rookie deals, Andre Jackson Jr. and Chris Livingston as well. So that takes you to 7. And that's 8, sorry. So then if you add Brook Lopez and Khris Middleton to that, that's taking you up to 10 guys. And then do you bring back a Jae Crowder or a Joe Ingles or a Jevon Carter? You can probably get away with bringing 2 of those guys back. That can take you to 12 players. And historically, when we've looked at the Bucks roster over the last few years, partially because of tax stuff and flexibility towards the back end of the roster, the Bucks have carried an extra roster spot. So if we just go ahead and assume that the Bucks are looking to get to 14 guys, it only leaves you with 2 extra players on the roster. And as Frank has done a really good job of explaining, not only on this show, but via his Twitter as well. The number that he keeps getting back to, Frank Madden, this is if you can find a way to contain the contracts of Khris Middleton and Brook Lopez to around that $49 million total, it does open up the idea that you could bring back one of Jae Crowder or Jevon Carter for a smaller figure, more than the minimum, but a smaller figure, and then still potentially have room to use the $5 million taxpayer mid-level exception. So in everything that I'm looking at and reading and the projections that certainly, I try to put together, it is around the idea that you could get Khris Middleton on a multi-year deal, but let's say anywhere between the $32, $33, $34 million mark per year, certainly for this upcoming year. And then Brook Lopez around the $15 million mark. And it leaves you in a decent position. But it does bring us back to the Jae Crowder conversation and where he lies in this. And that's why I'm going to be asking the listeners and the viewers today to tell me how you feel about Jae Crowder. The trade, we know there was some investment there when we talk about the second round picks. And then what you think a dollar amount looks in a fair way, looks like for the Milwaukee Bucks, because I still can buy into the idea that Jae Crowder can be an important player for this team. So I've got some of the numbers from a lineup perspective and really just how little we saw of Jae Crowder. So I definitely want to get to that next after we talk about our friends at eBay Motors. For a championship team, it's all about making sure every player is a perfect fit. It's the same when it comes to your vehicle. Every part needs to fit just right. So the next time you need parts and accessories, head to eBay Motors with eBay Guaranteed Fit. You can be sure every part you need fits right the first time around. Just add your ride to My Garage and look for the green check to know the part will fit, or you'll get your money back, because just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game when you shop on eBay Motors. And with over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll be back in the game in no time. After all, it's easy to bring home a win when the right parts are guaranteed. To get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices on ebaymotors.com. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers, eligible items only, exclusions apply. All right, as I mentioned right off the top, we thank you for making Locked On Bucks your first watch or first listen of every single weekday. Plenty to continue to discuss on today's show, including Jae Crowder and potentially some names that are on the lower dollar amount from the free agency list. Certainly, as I look at it this morning, some of the names that might have some interest to you. But let's get to Jae Crowder. So this is just some of the overall numbers that stand out to me when Jae Crowder, but when it comes to that negativity, I don't know whether we saw enough to feel that way. Now, he came to Milwaukee. There was 5 second-round picks that were used in that trade. Kind of a significant investment. So the first question I've got for the listeners is, do you care about that investment? And is part of your reason why you might want Jae Crowder back on the Milwaukee Bucks because you want to cash in on that trade and not just waste the assets that you have? And look, we've spoken a lot about the idea of the Donte DiVincenzo trade. And overall, while I can continue to understand the theory behind the trade, it didn't work out for the Bucks. That was not a trade that worked out in a positive way in terms of asset retention or asset use. So for Jae Crowder, if you say, well, we gave up 5 second-round picks for you around the trade deadline last year, we got 18 games of production in the regular season, 340 total minutes. And if you look at those total minutes, to me, the idea of bringing Jae Crowder onto this roster and for a playoff perspective, which we know he did not play a lot, was the idea of the different lineups you could use. What did Jae Crowder have in the tank in terms of versatility? Is he someone that can switch on to multiple defenders? And certainly he's got that physicality or attitude that, again, I don't like the comparison with PJ Tucker, but there was something similar there with the physicality in terms of the way that they would try and play, certainly the postseason experience. But the idea for any of these maximizing defensive lineups, particularly now when we think about Adrian Griffin and wanting to play an aggressive style defense, force turnovers, probably switch a lot, maybe play a little bit smaller, you would want Jae Crowder to be a plus player playing alongside Giannis, right? I mean, that seems like the obvious way that you would want to maximize Jae Crowder. And then all the other little things, the three-point shooting, they're additive. And if you get any offense out of Jae Crowder, you feel pretty good about it. Crowder and Giannis appeared So I already mentioned Jae Crowder played 18 regular season games. He appeared alongside Giannis in 10 games for a total of 96 minutes. Now, that is not enough to get any type of indication of what those two could do together with the other pieces you have with Jrue Holiday, Lopez, Middleton, all these guys. That's not enough time. So when I look at it, I can still have some optimism about what I think Jae Crowder can bring to this team. And the question is going to be the financial dollars there. Now, is Jae Crowder hurt by the idea that he didn't play a lot last year? We don't know what the preparation was like. Will teams be put off by that? Or are the Bucks going to be priced out by another team that thinks that he can be a real playoff impactful player? I'm not 100% sure, but as we already discussed, in an ideal world, if you can get Jae Crowder for around probably a little bit less than half what he was on last year, around the $10 million deal, if you could get him on that $4 million range, it can open up some flexibility. So that is going to be part of the equation for the Bucks when they're signing these contracts with these guys. I'm never someone that says that, particularly someone like Khris Middleton or Brook Lopez, for that matter, that have done a lot for this team. Like, it's not up to them to take a pay cut to bring in another player. But there's no doubt, if the Bucks get some favorable deals from the front office for some of these star players that have given a lot, and Jae Crowder, someone that's new to the system, it will open up the possibilities of maybe adding another impact player. And as we discussed, the Bucks are already probably going to be at about 11 or 12 guys and only have one or two more to add. So, to me, overall, part of it is still wanting to cash in on the investment of the 5 second-round picks and see what Jae Crowder can bring to the table. And part of it is also me liking what I thought he could bring last year at around the trade deadline. So I'm certainly interested in Jae Crowder coming back to the Bucks. I think he can be a player that can help them. Certainly, some of the interviews post the playoffs where he was kind of like, I don't know what my role was. I was kind of lost. I'm sure he didn't meet his expectations last year. And maybe his place on this roster wasn't where he thought it was going to be. Does a change of coach bring the optimism that that will change? And I'm sure he spent time with Adrian Griffin as well. I think we saw a little bit of that. So maybe there is a spot now where Jae Crowder, from what we have seen, loved playing alongside these guys and certainly got along well with the guys in the locker room. Maybe he's the type of guy that does want to come back. Now, what does that mean for my guy, Joe Ingles? I'm not 100% sure because we just haven't heard a lot from Joe. The interesting thing with Ingles is that certainly my expectation, based on what we've seen in previous years, is that Joe Ingles is going to play in the FIBA World Cup later this year in August. Maybe he plays really well because honestly, offensively, I thought he was good. He shot the ball better than I expected coming back off an ACL as well. I guess the question is the fit with Adrian Griffin and what he wants to do defensively. But I would imagine between Joe Ingles, Jae Crowder, Jevon Carter, maybe you're only bringing back one of those guys. So the question for you, the listeners right now, if you could bring back Jae Crowder, Jevon Carter, or Joe Ingles, is there one that you have a preference for? And why would that be the case? And that's all assume that this is around a $3 to $4 million deal. Let's just say that for the sake of what we are projecting that the Bucks might be able to do in the salary cap. And maybe all those guys get more than that. I'm not 100% sure. We'll see. But that's a question for you. Ingles, Carter, or Jae Crowder. If you had the option, let me know. I'm going to get to Jevon Carter a little bit next. So we're going to talk about him and then maybe just some other names to think of for the listeners as we move on through the week and free agency draws near about 48 hours away. All right, so there were some reports over the last 24 hours. Hoops Hype, I believe it was, Michael Scotto might have been the man there that was suggesting that Jevon Carter is going to opt out of his deal. It was around $2.3 million. I think, again, I don't think this is something that is a big surprise. And maybe, as much as we talk about what Jevon Carter could get elsewhere, maybe he is a guy that just goes, okay, well, let's just sign another 2-year minimum deal. Maybe I play really well. Maybe I can get a pay rise next year, but put the player option on the back end again. I think if you're the Bucks, you would love that. Jevon Carter had a excellent regular season, I think, with not only what he could do defensively, but his ability to fill gaps on offense, shot the ball really well from the outside. So Obviously, I think it's obvious. It's a no-brainer. If he wants to come back on that minimum type deal, he'll get a little bump in pay there. But is there a team out there that thinks that they want to give him more money than that and take him away from Milwaukee? I'm not 100% sure. I'm still, I think the playoff stuff was tough. And it was clearly a poor series for the Bucks overall, but I think the size does matter. I think the size makes it difficult. I think it can be a little bit more challenging to get away shots on the offensive end as well. So to answer the question that I asked all you before the break about Joe Ingles, Jae Crowder, Jevon Carter, I think that the Bucks have a problem at the point guard position in terms of they're going to need a backup point guard somewhere. I don't know what that looks like right now. So that's why perhaps positionally you might look at it and say that they need Jevon Carter there on the roster, and I will buy that. But I probably have Jae Crowder and Joe Ingles above Jevon Carter in terms of my power ranking of those three guys who I want back on the Bucks. So I think the Jevon Carter situation is going to be interesting to watch. I know he was a fan favorite. I know we always had a lot of listeners in the comments wanting us to talk more about Jevon and give him the praise that he deserves, quite frankly. But did you see anything in the postseason that concerned you? And how desperate are you to have Jevon Carter back? I think it's going to be an interesting watch over the next couple of days. I just jotted down a few names, and I'm just going to go through these super quickly in terms of guys that I think from a free agent perspective that might at least be on the radar of a team like the Bucks for some of those cheaper deals. And I have Carter down there and Crowder and Ingles as guys that, we'll see where their market is as things rolls on, but obviously guys that are very familiar for Bucks fans. I know one that Frank's mentioned before, Josh Richardson, is kind of an interesting player. He is going to turn 30 in a couple of months here in September. And look, let's face it, for the Bucks, that's a young player. But last year, 65 games, he got your double-digit scoring, actually shot the three pretty well, 36% from the outside. I think he was clearly a guy that going back a few years ago, the value was super high when he was playing his best basketball in Miami. He's kind of got lost in the shuffle a little bit through time with Philadelphia, then Dallas, then Boston, then San Antonio, then the Pelicans last year as well, but actually played decent minutes in the back end of the season after getting traded to the Pelicans there. So Josh Richardson, I think, is a player to watch. He certainly fits the guard defensive mindset of this team. He's not a knockdown shooter, but he is disruptive. So where does his market lie? Is he someone that's going to be in that taxpayer mid-level exception range? Probably. So Josh Richardson is a guy that I think there might be some interest there. Let me know what you think. And then I had, Kevin Love, we discussed on yesterday's show. I'm still looking for some thoughts on Kevin Love, if you think he's a guy that could join this roster. And then Dennis Schroeder is the other one. So I mentioned the Bucks needing a point guard. I think that is going to be the position of watch. And we discussed Derrick Rose on yesterday's show. And you want to talk about a guy that has been brought up on multiple occasions in terms of being linked to the Bucks. Dennis Schroeder has certainly been that. Certainly seen reports that the Lakers are interested in bringing him back. He played a lot for them last year. 30 minutes per game, got you around 13 points. Didn't shoot the three all that well, but he's a creative guy in terms of what he can do in the half court. Not an elite facilitator, but probably an upgrade to what the Bucks have had from a backup point guard position in years gone by. So Dennis Schroeder, I kind of feel like he's the type of guy that might be priced out of where the Bucks are at, but one to watch. And if things worked out and he wanted to come out to Milwaukee, I think that was a player that you get pretty excited about. Again, the Bucks are working on the margins here. And one guy I'll just mention, because I know Bucks fans are going to be interested, is Donte DiVincenzo. I just think that he's going to be priced out. I think he's getting closer to the $10 million range. I don't know what team is going to pay that money for him in terms of what teams have that type of cap space. I think just from a personal standpoint, it would be fun to see Donte play on a winning team. I think there's no doubt the Bucks would probably take him back if that was a situation that he wanted to get into, but I highly doubt that. So DiVincenzo, an interesting player, obviously a younger player. I think he would fit based on what we've heard of what Adrian Griffin wants to do defensively as well. So there's just a few names there, but keep on dropping your favorites from the free agency list, and we'll continue to roll on through a couple of days away. So the build-up is really going to continue to begin in the lead-up to Friday when things tip off, and Locked On Bucks is absolutely your place to keep up with it all. Don't forget, after you're done with Locked On Bucks today, make sure you check out Locked On NBA. They've got all the rumors and the latest reports from across the entire NBA, so they'll have you covered. And I'm sure that they're going to mention the Bucks along the way. Continue to let me know what you thought. Middleton, Lopez, Jae Crowder. That's the big conversation from today. Where are you at with Jae Crowder? Are you like me that we just didn't see enough and you still got optimism that he can be an important player for this team? And then go through some of the other free agent list names there. Your thoughts on Jevon Carter. Let me know how you feel. A quick little solo pod today to give the latest as we continue to roll on and the build-up continues to NBA free agency. We appreciate you all watching and we'll catch you all tomorrow.